more than a year and a half ago, many of us said we need to reconsider our expenditures and reconsider our revenues. We could not wait. And, Mr. Speaker, what we did was we waited. But I don't think anyone would quantify or classify this as a compromise. Mr. Speaker, this is not a compromise. This is heavy on one-time revenues, heavy on anticipation for federal stimulus money, heavy on the use of our rainy day fund because we already voted to borrow money for last year's deficit, and with very few examples, spending as usual. So what concerns me about this budget also, Mr. Speaker, is the anticipation in this budget that we're going to reorganize government. Last November, last January, last December, last February, I heard time and time again where we have a public hearing process and we're going to take all that stuff up in the public hearing process. What are the odds, Mr. Speaker, that the state of Connecticut is going to change the way it does business? And we've got some big numbers in here. I think it's $53 million over 2 years to reinvent government. Who thinks we're going to reinvent government for $53 million in 2 years? Mr. Speaker, this is not my idea of an appropriate budget for the state of Connecticut, and I'll say that for a couple of reasons. One, which I already mentioned, I think in this budget we're putting an even greater burden on a smaller population. I'm not going to argue whether or not they can afford to pay it. I think the argument that most people understand is that is a very small population that only needs to move by a very small number, and the numbers don't work. The gentleman talked about what I call the freeboard. The balance of this budget is being something around $1 million. If you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, if we don't get one estate in the state of Connecticut, in some cases, we're out of balance. If we end up with one significant taxpayer moving out of the state of Connecticut, we're out of balance. What this budget represents is a dream. A dream that our committees will fulfill a process that we hope that they'll fulfill, that our agencies will make reductions. There are managerial cuts in this budget, very significant managerial cuts, not arguing on behalf of keeping all the jobs. But ladies and gentlemen, I know what's going to happen 2 months from now, 3 months from now, when somebody recommends reductions in workforce. There's going to be somebody in this chamber who's going to stand up in front of Channel 8 News and say, I never thought I was voting for that when I voted for this budget. That's what's going to happen. When there are reductions in expenditures for nonprofits, and there are many of them in here, reductions in services, I know they hurt. But what's going to happen? What's going to happen is when the phone rings at your house or your office, you're going to pick up the phone and call the newspaper, and there's going to be a newspaper article. This budget is a recipe for disaster. We are going to be right back in here in 2 months, deficit mitigating, if the revenues don't stay where they are, and we don't have one blip in one wealthy person in the state of Connecticut. Never mind if the state of Connecticut decided that 50% or 25% of them wanted to stop smoking. Could you imagine? Our budget would be underwater by a significant number just because people made the right healthy decision, one that they find very difficult making. And I frankly don't think many of them are going to make because another $1 a pack tax.